I'm Lamar Hires. I'm 67 years old now, and I've been cave diving for over 40 years. I started in 1979. I learned how to open water dive and immediately went into cave diving without realizing I was going into cave diving. You know, when you live in Jacksonville, the springs are the closest dive sites because back then there weren't any dive boats going out of Jacksonville. It was 5 hours south to West Palm or hour and a half over to the springs. Ned DeLoach's underwater guide to Florida can get you in a lot of trouble.
And you own Jacksonville. So what's your first memory of diving?
My first memory would have been finishing the course and the instructor telling us, you know, stay around the edges of the lake, don't go in the middle, it gets deep. And of course, my buddy and I went right to the middle, dumped our BCs and wound up in about 3 foot of muck. And okay, this isn't good. We were able to get out, inflating our BC, surfaced, and never told our instructor we did exactly what he told us not to do, but that kind of set the stage for the kind of diving we did after that.
So you are originally from Jacksonville, Florida?
Well, yeah, that's where I was living when I learned to cave dive. When I learned to scuba dive with a friend of mine, we were working at a chemical plant, which once I started cave diving also made me very popular with all the cave divers because at the time, NiCad, nickel cadmium batteries, were state of the art back then, and most of them were using wet cell NiCads. And the electrolyte for those is potassium hydroxide, which is hard to come by. You have to make it your own using potash with water. And since I worked at a chemical plant, we had it in 50-pound bags. I would bring it out and I could mix up the electrolyte for the cave divers and everything. So when I worked at Branford Dive Center starting in '82, you came to the shop and that's where you got your electrolyte because I still had about 50 pounds of it stashed. My first memory was before I was actually a cave diver. And that was a trip that my buddy and I, we were over here diving and we went to Peacock Springs. Ned DeLoach's guide sent us right there. And we went up to the peanut side, found the slot, missed it, but found it. But there was no line there. The line was started back in there, okay? Then back out and went to, found the slot and went down, found the line down there and went to pothole. Surfaced in pothole. Now this is all on aluminum 80. When we surface in pothole, we have 1100 PSI left apiece. I ran out of air. Where the sign is now is where I took my last breath and did emergency free ascent from there. I saw angels coming down the crack, 2 cave divers with big lights, and I knew I was going to make it. And that was my first real cave dive that I said, all right, this was exciting, but I did something wrong. I'm not sure what it was. And it was probably a few weeks after that, Michael Chapman, he was my guy I learned to dive with and learned to cave dive with. We wound up at Pro Dive, which later became Aquifer Dive Center in Jacksonville. And Wes had just gotten back from Jamaica, where he had been a boat captain and a dive master and instructor over there.
You're talking about Wes Skiles?
Wes Skiles, yeah. So I met him back in '79. So anyway, he asked us what we're doing that day, and I said, well, we're going back over to Orange Grove. And he's like, have you been there before? I said, yeah. And he said, well, here, take this with you. And he was trying to hand me a blueprint to survival. And I looked at it, and it's like, man, we've got gas money, beer money. I don't have the money for that today. And he's like, I'll get it next time, Wes. He's like, no, I'm giving it to you. You guys just read this. Well, Mike was driving that day. So I'm sitting in the passenger seat and I'm going, Mike, listen to this. I read him one of the excerpts. That was our dive the last weekend, but we survived. So I went back in and said, okay, Wes, you got our attention. And that's when we took our cave course toward the end of 1979 with Wes.
So he was your first instructor?
Yeah, he was our cave instructor. So we had another instructor who taught us basic scuba, a gentleman named Stephen Durkee, through an IDEA certification. You know, when you're, yeah. Here again, you don't know what you don't know when it comes to training agencies. I want to learn how to dive. There's a dive shop. Whatever shingle they have out is what you do because you don't know any better. Especially back then, we had no internet. You couldn't Google anything.
So you've been active cave diver since 1979.
Yeah.
Just out of the ballpark, how many cave dives you've done? Roughly. Do you still keep counting?
No, it's sad, but I don't keep a log anymore, mainly because I got caught up in everything with the company and such. With, after my first 1,000 cave dives, that was I had over 500 cave dives in the first 5 years, and that's when I became an instructor in 1984. I was diving that much. I was diving every weekend, so I logged well over 100 dives a year to have 500 in the first 5 years. And then I became an instructor. So I was logging, I had a paper log and such. And then as we developed dive computers, the Bridge computer, which came out in '93, we had a logbook built into it. Download your computer, here's your logbook. Even transcribed all my paper logs into it. Well, that's Windows 3.1. And when you move to Windows 95 and all that, data files were not compatible. All of a sudden you start losing everything because it wouldn't come over. So then I started all over again. And then Windows 95 turned into 98, Windows Millennium, and it just became a mess in terms of keeping up with it. All I know is I have thousands of hours on a rebreather now because I maxed out the memory on the Nerd that day that just got through replacing the battery in. Richard told me he had to wipe it all. I said, I don't really need it all, but thanks.
Okay, so it's thousands and thousands.
Yeah,
of hours
I've got well over 5,000 cave dives.
That's impressive. Now you mentioned you became an instructor. What was the drive behind it? Why did you choose that path to be a full cave instructor?
I was already the instructor's instructor. Okay. When I worked at Ranford Dive Center from '82 to '84, and Wes was training chairman of the NSS CDS, the National Speleological Society. He was the training chairman, and we were dive buddies, diving with Woody and Tom, and we had a close-knit group. Well, new instructors would come up, and they would be familiar with the regular dive sites, Peacock, where they would be doing their training. But they hadn't done anything to really challenge themselves. So Wes would have them dive with me, and I would take them on dives that they wouldn't forget. Lloyd Bailey's a good example, that when they did his biography in NACD News years later, two of his most memorable dives are the ones he thought I was going to kill him on in Little River and Anderson Springs. So back then I would take them beyond their level of comfort to see how they would perform. And that was just normal dives that Wes and Woody and I were doing. But I was pushing them a little bit. So with that, and then it was the number of recoveries. Okay. By 1984, I'd already done over 10 recoveries. I've done 25 recoveries. Some of them doubles, triples, but 25 body recoveries and 2 rescues. And so all that was my inspiration. So when I teach, I don't teach that this is what you should do because that's what I was taught. I teach you to do this because I know what happens when you don't do it. Been there, done that, lived through it. So for me, it was passing on that passion about, surviving and getting out of the cave. And I've trained a lot of people who've gone on to be explorers, giving them that insight on what to do. So that was my reason for wanting to become an instructor.
Okay, and you became an instructor what year?
1984. Yeah. I think it was April of 1984. I became an open water instructor through NAUI. Yeah, I've got a very low number, 7684. Yeah, and then in November I became a cave instructor, 6 months.
Same agency?
No, in the National Speleological Society, NSS CDS. So I became a cave instructor, and 6 months later. Probably fast-tracked by today's standards, of course, but I'd already had more cave dives then than most of the people trying to become instructors. It was very small. Okay, and that made it easier to manage. And when I say manage, now a number of agencies have cave diving programs. And when you read their standards and everything, you'll see that they all come from the blueprint of the National Speleological Society cave diving section format. Everything they do comes right off of that. So they're doing programs based off of what we learned and put together through the hard work of accident analysis and body recoveries. And so back then in the mid to early 80s, real cave divers, when I say real cave divers, the ones that went on from intro and actually started doing some cave diving where there weren't any maps. It was a different era of how they handled themselves and what they did in the caves. So back then it was more of a mentoring process, where now it is check the boxes for training standards. Did we get this done? Did we get that done? And make sure that you tell them that they completed a drill because it was a drill, rather than, okay, you handled that pretty good. All right, so we don't need to address it. But today you have to make sure that you let them know that, oh, we did that drill. That's when this and this happened to you. Because everything's on social media. Back then, there was no social media. It was a mentoring process. And Peacock, the lines in Peacock, sometimes they were there, sometimes they weren't there. After a flood, Wes and I went in after the floods and would basically relay lines a lot of times and get them straightened out after the floods. Today, we've got thicker lines, gold line, chromaline, and it's an entirely different thing today. But back then it was more mentoring, and there were different camps for equipment, styles and such. The backplate and wing was just getting to the point where it was taking over in the mid 80s. Before that, there were still two different camps. Guys still using jacket BCs, maybe supplementing it with a wing, because one set of 104s, that's 35 pounds negative. Jacket BC would hold about 30 pounds. The biggest wing back then would only hold about 38. Put on a stage, got problems. Aluminum stages didn't come about till probably about early to mid 80s. Mid 80s before I started adopting them, and before that it was still 72s. So everything was heavy. Then put on a light that weighs 12 pounds.
Yep.
So I would say the big change is it's gone from mentoring to, training standards of do the drills, execute the dives, and you're done. So it's a big difference. The most we can do for them now is, exceed minimum bottom times to get them more experience than what the standards call for.
Big part of your life also has been exploration.
Mm-hmm.
You were exploring your whole life since pretty much you started cave diving. How was it?
It was exciting, very exciting. Okay, Bill Main put it best. We lived in the, as you put it, we lived in the golden days of the low-hanging fruit. What we were doing in the 80s was what stopped our mentors, Sheck, Paul DeLoach, those guys who were doing, all the big dives and such, and I asked Sheck more than once, Sheck, why did you guys stop here? You could have kept going. He's like, why? There was too many other things to do without putting that much work into it. So what we did were extending, going beyond where they went, because they stopped because they went from back mount to side mount, or they didn't bother with it at all because the entrance was too small and too much work. There was too many other things to find. So that's what, when we came in, we had all that to look at if we took a different direction, which was develop our own style of exploration. Side mount was the big ticket to making a lot of that happen. And I still credit Woody Jasper as, I still call him the grandfather of side mount, because the techniques and the styles we do today all come from his experiments and moving the sport forward.
So how did you become a side mount diver? What was your first introduction to side mount diving?
Oh, it would have been around 82, 1982. Now, my buddy and I, we had gone to a place called Rock Bluff Springs. And yeah, it's down on the Swanee River. And Shaq and Mary Ellen had been there. And they had stopped the end of their dive was about 200 foot in at a restriction. Well, we went in there and dug it out, got through. It was going. And it was all on back mount 80s, aluminum 80s. And so we told Wes about it. So Wes was like, okay, that's going to be your survey course. So we went in and explored Rock Bluff and mapped it and surveyed it. So Wes, Mike, Woody, and me, we all explored Rock Bluff and did that. And we pushed it to the point going that we could no longer do anything on back mount. That was probably the extent of it. People today, if they even tried on back mount, you know, they're going to get stuck and they're going to call us crazy. You know, I couldn't do it again, you know, because when you look at the names on maps and everything, those names are usually put there by the explorers. And some of them have meanings that people don't even realize. Like if you look at a map of Rock Bluff, you'll see a section called the Breath Hold Tunnel. And then after that, you'll see what we call the Elasta Room. The Breath Hold Tunnel was what Mike and I went through and we were committed. We couldn't turn around. We couldn't back up. We had to go forward until we found a place to turn around. And at last, we can turn around. So those two sections, and that's where the names come from. No, we went in there young and committed ourselves without knowing we could back out of it or turn around. And now it's on a map. Oh, it's just a short section. Just go through there and you turn around after you get through it. But what if you don't know that?
Did you ever had any oh God moments, you know, that you were like, what am I doing here? Were you exploring?
Oh yeah. That's happened a couple of times. You know, and most of that would have been back in the 80s and so much in the 90s. I was a little bit, I'd put it this way. After Jared was born, I kind of backed off a little bit. I still like to explore, but I would not commit myself to things that I wasn't sure I could get out of. You know, so back in the 80s though, a lot of stuff. And there were times when on some of the dives that I wasn't sure if I was going to get out because I wasn't sure which way was out. Getting turned around, you know, everybody takes line markers and arrows and all that for granted today. Back then, you made them, and they cost money. You know, you didn't put them. You'd put a clothespin on the line, and you know, hope somebody didn't kick it and knock it off. So anyway, now there were a few dives like that. One very memorable dive was with Woody at a place we call Creature Sink. You know, Woody his descriptions of sites always made him sound a whole lot better than what they really were. Okay. You know, oh yeah, it's an easy dive and we'll get in and do this. And it's like, okay, you get to the site and you're looking at this little ditch and you drop to your knees on your belly and you crawl in. And then you get down to a depth of maybe 20, 25 feet and you can barely do this because that's how tight it is, floor to ceiling. I mean, side and floor to ceiling. And we go back in there for 60 minutes to a rock pile that Woody says, I think it's going on the other side of this, you know, so we're going to lay some more line. And Woody's moving the rock pile while I am keeping it from filling in behind him. And then we've got a 90-minute exit and absolute zero visibility because it is so small and literally exiting through a chocolate milkshake. 90 minutes to get out. 60 minutes in and 90 minutes out. And I remember, you know, it's like if I lose the line, I'm screwed. If I lose the line, I'm screwed. Well, what if the line is broke? We've been moving so much stuff around and crawling. What if we broke the line? And then it's like, okay, well, there's not really too many places to go in here because it's so small. So I don't see where I can really get turned around. But you've got that thought process the whole time because you're 90 minutes in zero visibility. Most people think about zero visibility for a few minutes. Get out of the silk cloud and you're back in viz. A 90-minute exit. And so I get home and my wife is like, okay, how was the dive? Oh, it was good. It was good. We didn't relay any line, but it was a good dive, Playing back through it, it's the adrenaline. So you get out. It was an experience that most people won't ever do. It was all good. Well, a couple hours after we went to bed, I'm waking up to her yelling at me because I am reliving that dive and I have backed off the foot of the bed, taking the blankets, the sheets, everything with me. And when I woke up, all I could say was, I got out.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so that was probably one of my most memorable experiences of am I going to get out? But the difference there was I was constantly moving, and so I was working at it. What Woody talked about with Martin Farr, Darkness Beckons, is a place we call Ellison's up in Ellison's Cave up in Lafayette, Georgia. And at the bottom of it is a spring called Bluebird. And Martin had been in there and said it was impassable and you couldn't get in there. And Woody and I are talking about it, and Woody's, we can't let a Brit tell us what we can't do in our backyard. So we go in, and Woody's chipping away at this rock and at a restriction, and we get it to move. And then he goes through, and we spent 70 minutes down there. And so he goes through, comes back, and then we come back the next day, and we break through, surface onto a beach, and walk probably about a quarter mile, maybe half a mile through dry cave. And after doing about a 300-foot swim at a depth of about 24 feet to get back there to that restriction. And so it was all good. And we come back and we tell the guys, and the dry caving community up there hears about it. And if they could connect Ellison's with the section we had just found, then it would make Ellison's the deepest pit this side of the Mississippi. Right now it was 4th. So it became a big event for us to go up there and see what we could do to connect it to the upper level. And so 6 of us went in. The only 2 people who had ever seen it or knew anything about it was Woody and me. Wes, Paul Smith, Jeff Stillo, and Luis Manoyo, the other 3 guys, had never been there or anything. So all they know is what Woody and I have told them. And we get there, and the basin's all silty. It's nasty. So, all right, well, we need to run a reel. Usually you could just look inside and see the line a few feet in. But since it wasn't there, I said, all right, I'll set a reel. So I go in and set a reel and go through, and we get to the beach, and we split up into 2 teams, and those guys exit a little bit before us. And when we get back to the beach, I see one set of fins slapping the top of the water as they make their way out. So now Wes and Woody and I are sitting up there, and I'm like, Wes, this line is slack. There's something wrong with this line. And we've got no viz in the basin at all. I mean, for 6 of us going through this small cave, there's no visibility left. And it's like the line's broke. I can tell it. And Woody's like, well, maybe, maybe not. Now, at the same time, when we got through the restriction, Woody's like, okay, I'm going to go check out this other lead, because maybe that's where Martin had tried to come through. And maybe that's why he didn't find what we did. So now we've got a T in the line in the pool where the beach was inside the cave. So I go down and come to the T. I go into the restriction, and the restriction is about 10 foot long. I go into it, and the line's broke. Oh, good cave diver, what do? You pull out your safety reel and fix it. I'd used my safety reel at the entrance. So I didn't have any line with me. So I had to back out. I back out, and I get my fin caught in the T Woody had put into the line. I'm gone for a while, so Woody thinks I made it through and everything's good. He comes down, sees me entangled, gets me unentangled. We surface, and I tell Woody what happened, and Woody's like, all right, I'll go through now and try to fix it, and everybody can follow. Well, Woody goes down, and like I said, there's no visibility. He goes down and follows the line he had just put in. He doesn't make the left-hand turn into the restriction. I'm watching his bubbles, and I'm like, Woody. So anyway, he comes back, and we're like, okay, we got a problem now. Wes, you need to fix this. Don't do what Woody did. You need to reel, have it ready. You need to set this right here onto the left side. It's small, shouldn't be a problem, but I don't know where the other part of the line is. And Wes, you have to fix it and then come back and tell me and Woody you fixed it. Because Woody and I both have about 1,200 PSI left in a single 72 with a Y valve. Oh yes, it was a single side mount tank off to get through this restriction. So we had a single 72 each with about 1,200 PSI left in it. We had no gas except for a one-way rush exit after all that. So Wes, you have to go fix it and come back and tell us. So, classic movie scenario. Wes is gone, he comes back, he surfaces about half his mask out of the water, and then he lifts a caving pack. And we're like, oh crap, who does that belong to? Which one of them didn't make it? Which one of them broke the line? Which one of our buddies is down there? Oh crap, he's gonna be blocking our exit. How the hell are we gonna get out if his body's in our way? And Woody and I only have 1,200 pounds apiece. We don't have enough gas to do anything except hightail it to get ourselves out there. There was only one place where we could have pushed him out of the way to get around him. So we had no idea where he was or what was going on. So Wes shows us the pack. He turns around to go back down. And in the meantime, the other three guys, all three of them made it out. Luis went out first, and then Stillo went out second, and he broke the line. So Paul Smith was caught in the restriction with a broken line. And once he lost the line, because it was a low bedding plane area, and we're hugging this wall to get through it, very sharp rock. It literally cuts the strap and breaks his pack off of him. But he's able to make it through and find the line tied off on the outside. So Luis, we got to go down there and fix this. We got to go down there and fix this line, because these guys are going to be coming back and they don't know what to do because nobody can see. It's crap for viz. So Wes is coming out. He's in the restriction, fixing to pull himself out. And it's like we're all wondering, where's the body going to be and who was it? Well, in the meantime, Luis has gone in and goes back to the restriction, and he sees the glow of Wes's light and Wes's hand on the rock to pull himself through the restriction. And Luis's first thought is, okay, we didn't make it and they're dead. So he grabs Wes's hand. Wes freaks out, pulls his hand back. Luis is like, oh, they're okay. And he turns around and leaves. So now Wes is exiting with like, what happened? Was I touched by the angel of death or what? Am I going to be grabbed again? What's going to happen on my way out? Because Luis just turned and hauled butt out. And then I went next, and then I'm thinking I'm going to run into Wes's fins while he's, the tunnel's clogged while he's trying to move a body. And then Woody comes out behind me thinking the same thing. We all made it out, had a good laugh and a beer.
Well, after
I've been very fortunate to be able to cave dive all over the world. I've been cave diving in all over, in the U.S., southern U.S., in Florida, and then Mexico. I mean, I was cave diving in Mexico in 1987, before it became the Mexico that everybody knows today. And then Puerto Rico, Russia. I've even been in Wiki Hole in the UK. So I've been very privileged, and even cave diving in Italy, in the River Timone, outside of a little town called Trieste, and Molnar Cave in Budapest. So I've been very fortunate for all that. And but some of the best exploration, probably one of the that sticks out the most to me would have been what we did at Telford when we connected Telford to Louisville back in '89. Woody, Woody's so many of these stories because we were diving so much together. It was a time when Woody and I were exploring Telford. We had gone to the end of Scheck's line, figured it out, and there were things like with Scheck's map. I remember talking to him because I was resurveying Telford, and I was, impressed and surprised that our maps were so close to each other. But I was doing a topo overlay to see where we were at and what was going on. And like with Telford, I think there's a section that Scheck labeled the expressway. Well, I asked Scheck one day, I said, Scheck, the expressway, that's where it goes under 51, isn't it? He smiled and said, yeah, that's where it goes under Highway 51. Had nothing to do with the size of the tunnel. It was just where it was underground, under Highway 51. So I'm like, all right, so we're right on with our surveys. So anyway, Woody and I knew there was still more to find there, but we weren't sure where. In the meantime, Woody was exploring Louisville with Tom Morris. And so here again, exploration is kind of keep it on the quiet so that you don't give it away so you don't get scooped, which has been happening to me and Woody a couple of times. But anyway, so we're exploring Telford. He's exploring Louisville with Tom. And then finally, Woody just breaks down and goes, I can't do this anymore. We all three need to get together and talk. And then he said, because everything says these two caves are coming together. So we get together, we talked, Tom gave me his survey from Louisville. And so I put it into the computer and got the plot and put it onto the topo overlay. We were less than 100 feet apart. Yes. I'm like, holy cow. We're right there. So that turned into Woody, Tom, and me going into Louisville and gone through the first and second maze. And those mazes were all Tom's way of keeping people out of them. You get to a lot of T's and it kind of scares the cave divers. A lot of T's, none of them are marked. Just one arrow for the true exit. So it worked. It kept people out of it. But anyway, so we go back through the second maze and it's like, okay, regardless of what the tunnel looks like, I've got to hold a north by northwest heading. No matter how nasty it looks, I've got to hold a north by northwest heading if I'm going to connect these two caves. So we get back there. They let me go through Woody's wallow first because nobody else can see after the first guy. And since I'd never seen that section of Louisville, I got to go first. So get through that, get through the second maze, and end of the line, I pull out my compass. 90 feet later, we connected Telford and Louisville. So we had a short-lived world record for a 7,200-foot side mount traverse. They took it away from us at WikiHole shortly after that. There's always a little bit of competition going on. But that was probably one of my most memorable exploration projects that turned into something, unusual, connecting Telford to Louisville with Tom and Woody. So that was a big thing. And then after that, it would be my expeditions to Japan. 3 years I went over there dry caving and cave diving. In a cave called Shigaratari, there was a lake room at the back of the known passage, 700 meters back. And they had sent a diver in. And he was not a cave diver. He was just a local diver who worked at the post office. And he said, oh, I can do it, but it'll take many tanks. So they carried in like 10 tanks for this guy. And he had no idea. He'd never even seen the lake yet, didn't know what he needed. And they carried all these tanks in for him. And he got in the water and was out in less than a minute saying, oh, it goes deeper than 40 meters. It can't be done. And so that was the last they heard of it. But that story had gotten to me through the Cavers Club there. And since I was going over there working with Seiko on our dive computers for Rite, I said, this is an opportunity to me to have a little bit of fun while I'm working. So we went in there. I sent over steel 95s because if it's over 40 meters, don't know how long it's what the distance is or anything. So the first expedition, we took steel 95s, and it was just me and another dive buddy of mine, Peter. So we went in, and Peter had not done much side mounting, but he was also my Japanese liaison. He could speak Japanese and all that. So we kitted up, and we didn't get too far in when he said, I can't do this. I can't bail. I'm too task loaded between a single 95 Y valve and then also the camera for filming, the cold water. He was like, I'm just silting the place up. He said, I'm not going to be any good. So I'm like, all right, okay, I get it. I said, so give me your tank. So I put on both side mounts and went for it. And dropped down to 30 feet and then started back up again. It was nothing more than your classic, P-trap in a dry cave. I surfaced on the other side, but I couldn't get out of the water. It was a sheer wall with about a 3-foot climb. So it was too tall for me to take the tanks off and get them up on the bank. So that ended the trip there for trying to push Shigavatari. So we went back to next year. Next year we went back with steel 45s. I sent those over, and Mike, and Peter and I were able to do that and get out of the water. But I was using a design that Woody had come up with for easy on and off, using a pin and receiver system, a pretty slick system for side mount. But I didn't realize it till I got over there that it sucked when it came to 45s. It was designed for heavier steel 95s. That would hold everything in place. But the lighter tanks, they'd move around and they would slide out. So it was very cumbersome. But they were light enough with 2 people that once we surfaced, one guy could hold the tanks while you got out and then handed everything up. So we were able to do that to the next sump. But we couldn't do anything else because we couldn't climb the waterfall. We couldn't do anything with that setup. So the third year, went back over there. And this year was the start of our Transpac. This is when I was designing the Transpac, a soft pack. And the whole reason for that was I needed to be able to do singles, doubles, or side mount with a single harness because I had no idea what I was going to encounter back there. So we did the 45s again because we'd left them over there. And we were able to band them up independently on the back of the harness so we could get them back there to the site. And then with the light 45s on our back, we were able to climb out of the water and then hike them and then climb the waterfalls and then crawl to get back into the next sumps. We only had to pull them off once to go side mount to get through the sump. The rest of them we were able to keep them on our back. And it gave us a platform to put our fins on while we were climbing the waterfalls. So we pushed that back for over a mile and stopped at sump 7. And that was only because we ran out of tape to keep our dry suits, the punctures in the dry suits from leaking. We were diving neoprene dry suits and with a roll of duct tape. And because it was, this is a dry cave, so the rock was very sharp. You puncture the suit, you tape it up and keep going. 8 hours in 38-degree water. Anyway, so that was the end of that. And then we did a couple of other caves over there, Aka and then also Usendo. So it was very interesting. And that was an expedition that I led, those 3 years working with the Japanese dry cavers, they were very nice, and it was a lot of fun to work with them. But they would not do it themselves. They needed somebody to come over with some diving experience to actually head it up and do it. So for 3 years, I went over there, and it evolved. And in '98, our last trip over there is when I developed the Transpac and had it ready to be what it's become today with one of our flagship products. Why? Depends on the environment. Okay, that's where I kind of draw the line. Like for me, cave diving, now with the chest mount, I prefer side mount Okay, it keeps me a lower profile, and also I carry more gas, which is even better. Because when I'm side mounting with the chest mount, I'll wear steel 85s. And if I have a proper cave fill in them, I got lots of gas for bailout and redundancy. If I'm teaching chest mount, then I'll wear like a set of steel 50s on my back. Lots of gas, easy to play with. I'm diving off of a boat. I prefer a single or a set of small doubles with a chest mount. So for me, it's just really all about where I'm diving and what I'm doing. It's a tool, and I'll use what I consider the best tool for the job. And sometimes that job is not about the job itself. It's about, walking to the site, having to climb, getting in and out of the water. What's the overall best application for this dive is how I look at it. And I am I believe in when in Rome. If everybody's diving side mount there, that's what I'm going to dive. And if they're diving back mount, I'm not going to be the only one in side mount, because usually there's a reason. I mean, we dove Scapa Flow this past May, and up northern Scotland, and so that was a very nice. We were on the Valhalla with Hazel, that's her boat, and she had a lift on that side, so we were diving that with just small doubles, 7-liter tanks, and offboarding our oxygen with it. She had a lift. It was much easier to do than to try to go side mount. I could have done side mount, it would have worked, but we were already jammed up on the dock, and there wasn't any room for people to lay out side mounts in addition to it. We had one guy with side mount, and he had to take up 2 bench spaces. So this kind of made all the rest of us cram up a little bit tighter.
I just want to mention Scapa Flow. It's a truck lagoon of Scotland.
Yes.
That's where the fleet of the Germans after World War One
was scuttled.
Scuttled, yeah, intentionally sunk.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. How was it? Was it good?
It was good. We we went there in end of May, and it was excellent diving. I really loved it and all. The visibility could have been a little bit better. And here again, I found out when we were there, we got there toward the end of the season before the algae bloom gets bad. In 2025, we're going to Melon Head in Ireland to see those wrecks.
Between the explorers.
It was very intense sometimes. It depended. Now, the side mount stuff, we didn't have any competition because it was all one team. We actually, they wrote about us in Outside Magazine in, I think it was 97 or 98, the Moles of Florida. And there was a group of 6 of us. And because of that, we all worked together, and so there was no competition there. But when it came to anything that was back mount, there was a lot of competition. And you kept quiet on what you were doing. It's kind of funny when you look at things now. Like, we were exploring an upper section of P3. And when we were exploring it, the line going into it was hidden. I mean, we made sure you could not see that line, and there was no marker on the line. We did nothing to let anyone know we were working that area. Okay, I mean, until we were done with it, we didn't tell anybody about it. And there's like with Telford, when Woody and I were working Telford, a lot of people knew what we were doing back there. And there will always be the question, well, do you go left at that second tee or right? I don't remember. So we would kind of do things like that. But there was enough competition. There was competition, and we had to be careful about it. Woody was notorious for give him a beer and he'll start talking. Woody, Bill Main and Bill Gavin scooped us on a section of Small Creek tributary in Little River because Woody had a beer with Bill and told him what we were doing.
That's funny.
Yeah. Same thing on the Chipola River. Bill Gavin scooped me and Woody on some stuff we were working on over there.
So it was friendly but competitive.
Oh yeah, friendly but competitive. It was always friendly. We would talk about it, and then when it was all done, then we would sit down and talk about how we messed with each other.
And let's talk about a little bit dive Rite. If you want to mention a little bit of history, 30 plus years in the business.
40.
40 plus years.
40 years. We started in 84, 2024 marks 40 years.
Okay, so how did Dive Rite started?
Well, 1984 is when Mark Leonard and I started Dive Rite. He was my lead instructor at Brantford Dive Center while I was managing it. And cave diving was growing. Okay, the modular format had been put in place. We're doing cavern, intro to cave, whereas back then we called it basic cave, and then there was full cave. So people come in for classes, and oh, you need a reel. Well, you couldn't order a reel from anybody. They didn't have them. You know, and when I was working in Brantford, I'd have these guys come in, you know, oh man, look at this reel I made in my basement. Really? How many you got? Oh, I got 6 of them with me. Bring them in, let's talk. So I was buying anything I could from anybody that was making stuff. And Mark was making stuff too, because he needed to make things for his students. He couldn't tell students they needed a reel and couldn't get them. So he was making a few things, and then in '84 we turned it into a company. And we had 13 products. 6 of them were lead weights that we actually poured ourselves. And then the others were a back plate, harness, a few D-rings, snaps, and 3 reels. A jump reel, a safety reel, and a primary reel. And then we kept growing from there. Now we're well over 1,000 products or whatever that we actually sell for each item. And it's just grown ever since. With adding to the product line, evolving. You know, we were the first ones to make the back plate commercially available. It was designed and such, and but it still hadn't hit the market. So we brought it to the market, and we did that with the back plate. Established a 11-inch on center spacing for the back plate. So there are a few things Dive Rite's done out there that people just take for granted because, you know, in 40 years it's ancient history. You know, it's 11-inch on center. Well, where'd that come from? Well, Dive Rite set that up because it was a machine shop process. You build a jig, the top hole had to be 2 inches from the top, so the webbing, you could burn a hole dead center. So flip it around to the bottom, burn another hole, and now you have 11 inches on center because it's a 15-inch long plate. And that became the worldwide standard for bolt spacing on doubles. And it was all because of a simple machining process. The singles mounting plate, or as it's called today, the STA, the single tank adapter. That was another Dive Rite product, you know, and a lot of these things were out of necessity. I came up with that in 1986 when we also had an ABS back plate because my wife had she just learned to cave dive, and she wanted to dive her pink and blue wing with a single tank and not just her doubles, which were also pink. And so I had to come up with a way to put that single tank on a back plate. So I designed and developed that, and as you see, everybody's got them now, but that was a Dive Rite product in 1986. And it was all to keep a woman happy. You know, and then we've got the computers, the bridge computer. We came out with the bridge computer in 1993, and it was the first programmable nitrox computer. That's what led to all my adventures over in Japan, was going over there working with Seiko. But you could program it from 21 to 50%. Before that, there was nothing else. There was only the Orca Phoenix, which only did 32. Well, we knew we needed to be able to track oxygen levels in terms of a whole body clock. And so that spurred research by Dr. Bill Hamilton and Randy Bohr on actual hyperbaric studies, and became a UMHS paper for 1992, which was the basis for our oxygen clock. And that was patented by Seiko. But then they didn't enforce the patent. They said it was too big of a move forward for the diving industry for nitrox that they allowed anyone to use it. But you can credit Seiko for developing that for our Dive Rite bridge computer. And everybody uses it now for the whole body oxygen clock on their computers. So we're the reason that even came to being for tracking that. I know there's a lot of things like that that people, they don't see because it's just out there and they just assume. So we've done a lot of things like that to move things forward with some of the stuff that's just taken for granted in industry.
Your tremendous success lately has been your closed circuit chest mount rebreather,
Yeah.
which is pretty much taking the world by storm. Can you elaborate a little bit on the development of that particular product? What was the idea behind it? You know, I know before you guys have the back mount Optima rebreather closed circuit system, which was also successful.
It was successful, but it was another, you know, what I call another Me Too. You know, you had the Meg, you have a number of different rebreathers out here, and here's just another back mount unit. And but for me, the chest mount was all about, you know, one, getting older. I wanted to be able to streamline what I was carrying. I didn't like to carry heavy tanks anymore. Carrying heavy tanks and staging. And then places like Cal Springs, you know, which we explored back in the 80s. It was a situation where I wanted to do some more exploring back there. But the strong current, can't run a scooter in there. It required a lot of gas. So I was looking for a way to be able to extend exploration without having to carry a lot of extra gas. And then travel just kind of creeped in on that as well, because airlines kept tightening down on what you could take for luggage. So trying to make something that was even smaller than that. So I got the first idea for it I started thinking about it probably around 2014, 2015, when Paul Heinrich approached us because he was diving an Optima for their Wiki-Wachi stuff. So he needed a bailout rebreather. So we, you know, cannibalized a unit to build a bailout unit for him, for them to set that record of 450-foot depth in Wiki-Wachi. So he was diving a back mount Optima and a version of it that we did for a bailout unit. So that's what got me thinking about it. 2017, I actually started playing around with some designs. And I learned a lot about what not to do with those early designs. You know, trying to go to a single counter long and things like that. They just weren't working. And so it wasn't until probably 2019 that I started having something that I was comfortable with, and more important, the guys here were comfortable with. You know, because everything here, they dive as well. So if I come up with an idea and they don't like it, they're not going to dive it. Well, that means there's not going to be a market acceptance for it. It can't be just one person. So I finally got it to the point where they weren't afraid to dive it. And so when we got it to that point where it's becoming comfortable, then I got with one of our designers to do the bag and lay everything out. And we mimicked the human lungs in terms of the shape and fit, and just put the attachments on the outside rather than the inside. And we got some very good results for the worker breathing and how it would ride and everything. And it just took off. Where I was looking for a toy because I was getting old, turned out to be something that really played into what the market was looking for, but didn't know they wanted yet. And once it was out there, it got wide acceptance.
I just want to mention that your rebreather, the Chest Optima, it's a main unit for the Peacock 3 exploration.
Yes.
Going on by KU.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And they pushed the cave way far.
Yeah.
Thanks to your
Yeah.
rebreather.
Yeah. It's allowed for a number of things like that, and it's part of the deep explorations in Mexico as well. Yeah, and they're going back this spring, and the CHOP is one of the lead rebreathers for that because it's so easy to take in and out.
Awesome. Is there anything that we should be getting excited about coming up from Rite anytime soon, or?
Oh, I hope so. We have a few new things coming out. As far as brand new products, something just hasn't been done before. Not yet. We're refining and working on current products, improving, making them smaller. We were one of the first to come out with a handheld light that would be considered and accepted as a primary light for cave divers. Now, a lot of other companies have them now too, but we were the first ones to do it and make it acceptable to have a handheld primary. Now, that whole idea was Woody's back in the 80s and such, because we knew for our side mounting that it was, to butt mount a canister light and get through some of the restrictions we were going through was just terrible. So Woody had always had that idea, but the problem was back then, that primary hand light that he had was 4-inch PVC and a par 36 bulb in front of it, so it was massive. Now, we're down to something that's just a little over 2 inches in diameter and 6 inches long, and burns longer and brighter with all the advancements in LEDs and lithium batteries. So we've got a few new things like that coming out. We've got some more updates and accessories coming out on the chest mount and such. We're working on some new things for that to make it even better than what it is now. And BCs, we continue to try to strive to come out with something new, but there are some things that tried and true just seems to be the best way to do it. And went back to the drawing board, and basically, for what the guys were doing in P3, we were trying to give them something that would help them explore that cave the way they needed to explore it. So that was a lot of the process behind the Nomad Ray. It had a lot of maiden voyages on exploring that cave as we came up with the final look.
That you are the elite member of the very small group of cave divers successfully performing cave diving rescue. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. I've been lucky enough to be involved in two of them. One of them was at Devil's Ear, where my buddy and I just happened to be there when this guy turned the corner about, just downstream of the Hill 400 jump, where you're on the straightaway between the park bench and that turn to look at Hill 400. And he comes up, he's got a scooter with him, a Steel 95, and a set of doubles on, and he's giving us the out of air and pointing back in the cave. So I'm on a prototype side mount rig, no long hoses with it, and my buddy is on conventional back mount. And so when we see this and pointing back, my buddy's immediately looking around the corner to see where his buddy is, because for me, this and pointing back there is telling me his buddy ran out of air back there, because he's still got a regulator in his mouth. About two more of these pointing, he just spits his regulator out and is on the ceiling. So I immediately grabbed my buddy's long hose out of his mouth, snatch it out of his mouth, and put it in this guy's mouth and get him breathing. And it was so quick that I was able to get him breathing right away. And so then I have them exit together, and I'm bringing out the 95 and the scooter. The scooter's dead. So we still didn't know what went on, and we still think there's a guy in the back. So I've got Mike, my buddy, with him in Devil's Eye, decoing, and we're writing notes, what's going on, where's your buddy, when's your last time you see him? And I've already broke to the surface, and fortunately it was a Wednesday evening, which is a big locals night for cave diving around here. So I had a couple of guys I've already yelled up there, and they're getting their scooters and they're getting ready to do reconnaissance to see if they can, find him. So anyway, that's when we realized that he's like, no, it was just me. I was all alone. I just ran out of air back there. And it was a typical scenario where he had bought a scooter, And first dive, I hadn't charged it, just took it out of the box to dive it. And fresh out of full cave, and his instructor, Tyler, and Rose, the manager at Jenny, they were both waiting on him on the surface. I made sure I wasn't there when they got there. I knew that wasn't going to be a conversation I wanted to be any part of.
Rose Meadows?
Yeah, Rose Meadows and Tyler Moon. So anyway, so it was a typical scenario of why you need training on scooters. He hadn't charged it. He scooted back to the Hinkle. He knew he needed a safety bottle, but it was a steel 95, but he had left it on and it had free flowed. So when he gets to the Hinkle, the scooter dies. He starts to swim it out and realizes his 95 is empty. So all the gas he's got is what's in his back. And he didn't want to give up his brand new scooter or leave anything behind because he knew he wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. And it almost killed him. So we just happened to be there at the right place at the right time to get him out. That was just fortunate that we passed him on our dive. The other one, the one that was a lot more involved and difficult was Thunder Hole in 1999, where I rescued a girl there. And that was one that it was difficult on a number of levels, but not so much the rescue itself as it was just the communications and making everything happen properly. When I got the call, because especially back then, I was first on the list. All the sheriff departments around here, they just called me. They called Dive Rite and me, so they knew I could get a team together if there was anything. So we would be their call center for anything in this area. So I get the call, and it's like, so the message is, two divers at Thunder Hole, they got separated at decompression, and the one diver's out, he made the call. I'm like, okay, separated at decompression, this could be a long night, so let me finish my sandwich and then I'll go. So my buddy and I finished, and then we rode out to Thunder Hole. We're about 45 minutes away from my house, so we get out to Thunder Hole. Bill Reneker and Mike Bruick are already there. And so I'm listening to, and the sheriff's department's already there, and I'm listening to everybody tell me what's going on. And along with her buddy, he was there too, he was there and such. So Mike Bruick had already been in a couple of times looking for her and hadn't found her. I mean, he was shivering. He didn't even have a dry suit on. He was just in his jeans, and looking for her. And I'm like, okay. All right. Bill hadn't been in there at all because he had never been in there, so he didn't actually get in the water. So I'm listening, and then I'm trying to get the story from her buddy. And it's like, it was just a mess. It was just like, okay. We'd already been there for a few hours when all this is going on, and it's getting dark. And finally I said, look, guys, be quiet. Tell me what happened again with you and Linda. Tell me what happened. And it starts out with, well, I said, start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. Tell me what happened. And I'm having to look over at Bill and Mike. Be quiet, be quiet. I want to hear it from him. I don't want you to help him tell a story. I don't want you to lead him at all. Just tell me what happened. And so now the story goes, well, she hadn't been here before. And so I told her that the line starts on the log that you can basically stand on. And so I went down, found the line, went in at 30 foot where the water clears. I dropped my deco bottle and I waited on her. And I'm like, what? What do you mean you waited on her? He's like, yeah, we got separated setting our deco bottles. Wait a minute, I heard you got separated at deco, meaning the dive's completed, tanks are depleted, and you got separated somewhere along the way out, because usually that means they got separated before and he just realizes it at deco. And I went, oh crap, this is entirely different. So as they were getting ready to shut down and start operations again tomorrow, because we've got zero vis in the basin and cavern area, I go, she's got a lot of gas. If she's got doubles a stage and a deco bottle, I'm gonna go in. And they're like, well, Lamar, we looked, we couldn't find her. I said, guys, did you look in the zero visibility cavern? Well, no, we looked in the side tunnels and all. I said, she's a trained cave diver. If you can see, she can see. She can find the line. She can get herself out. You need to be looking where you can't see and where she might have trouble. So I get suited up real fast. I jump in and I go in and I can see a reel on the floor, barely just make it out on the floor where she had tried to deploy a safety reel to get out. And it was all jammed up. And to put it in perspective, when you go into this place, if you've seen it in the summer, in the wintertime when everything was nice and clear, you've got a gentle slope going in from about 8 foot in the basin where the line is tied off, and it slopes down, then it gets rocky, and the line follows the floor, sloping down to 30 foot. Well, over a stretch of about 20 to 25 feet, making that angle down, you've got a cavern that has a big dome, and you can get up to 15 feet. And so you're in like a shell up here, where the entrance is here, and then the cave is there. So she was up here on the ledge at 15 feet, okay, because she had no idea, first dive. She had no reference point. Do I go up? Do I go down? Do I go left? Do I go right? Which way is out? I have no idea. She had never even been in the cave or seen anything. So she was sitting on the ledge. So I go in, and since I know I have to work in zero visibility, my buddy was like, well, you may go with it. No, this is going to be pretty delicate with the fact that it's zero viz. I don't want to have to keep an eye on anybody else or do things because I'm having to worry about somebody else. I'll just go in there and look for her. And so I go in, and so, trying not to breathe much. I'm listening, and I heard her moan. And then I could hear her beating on her tank with a clip. So I started swimming around in the cavern area, and I found her sitting on the ledge. And I grabbed her, put her on the line, and brought her out. She had been in the water for 6 hours and 10 minutes. And all I could say when I got up was, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. If I'd have known, I'd have been here sooner.
I'm sure she was glad to see you.
She was glad, but it was just the fact that, everything was good. And the thing is that, when you ask her, and we asked her, you okay? Yeah, she was fine. She probably did a whole lot better than most men I know, because they would have been panicking and freaking out. But she was there calmly, waiting, and such. Because and her biggest fear was, she was like, I could hear the generator running. And my biggest fear was it would stop, meaning you guys had shut down for the night.
Wow.
Yeah. IRR, International Underwater Cave Rescue and Recovery.
Okay. And you were the instructor trainer.
Yeah.
For a long time. Are you still active trainer, or you?
No, I've retired. I've moved on. I'll go assist when needed, but mainly just as surface operations. But at the end of the day, though, things have changed so much. When the IUCR was formed, our biggest concern was dealing with the open water fatalities. Okay, it was not uncommon to have a fatality, almost once a month. Open water divers. Peacock didn't become a state park till I believe 1989. I think 47 people have died at Peacock over the years. Most of them were open water divers. Okay, so when you have that kind of stuff going on, education about the site, about cave diving was very important. The big breakthrough for the CDS was PADI accepting and developing a cavern program. So now, instead of ignoring overhead environments in their open water classes, it's now a topic because you can move on for cavern training and why do it, rather than just being quiet about it. So that was a big plus to curtail the number of fatalities. But it was nothing for a double, a triple fatality over the weekends from divers coming down, because it was like the Wild West here. The springs were not state parks. They were just open sites. Go down there and dive. And that was one of the real reasons where there was no controls over the sites whatsoever. So fatalities were there. So the IUCR was developed because law enforcement didn't have the resources or cave divers on their, even if they had a dive team. So Henry Nicholson knew that in order to keep cave diving being basically outlawed in North Florida, we needed to provide a mechanism for law enforcement to have somebody to call to expedite these recovery operations. So that was the reason for the IUCR. Now, since then, as everything has grown, this would be one of the good things about social media and everything else now, that there is so much awareness of what overhead environment diving is. You very seldom get the bad actors who go in without any type of training or awareness. So now the IUCR, what it is something entirely different and is not needed like it was needed before. Now it's all about, we have cave diving fatalities. We've had 70, I believe it's 76 cave diving fatalities since records being kept since about 1961 here in the US. And 3 of the last 5 were all men over 50. So now we have different factors. And now we also have rebreathers, we have scooters. Back in the day, most of the recovery operations were pulling them somewhere out of the cavern zone or maybe a couple hundred feet from the entrance. Now, 6,500 feet from the entrance, 7,000. There were a number of restrictions. More specialized teams are needed. So some of the people who want to volunteer their time may not be the ones who actually are the ones who can and are qualified to go into those areas to go get those divers. Okay, I've done a number of them. I've done 25 body recoveries, and those 2 rescues were the only ones that were true rescues where I was not on the team with somebody having a problem. And it's interesting as into how some of this shapes up now today with some of the fatalities that happen. My longest one from pulling a diver from back in the cave has been 4,000 feet. Devil's Ear, 4,000 feet back. And it was quite, quite a job to get that diver out. Multiple disciplines were needed. People on side mount, people on rebreathers, scooters to be able to extract that body. So the IUCR was never formed to deal with extractions of that magnitude. When it was formed, it was for the weekend warriors who wound up in cavern or close to the entrance. We were an extension of law enforcement so we could keep the sites open. So it's evolved quite a bit. And like in '67, my time was up. There are younger guys out there could do all this, and I don't need to be involved. But I'm still an advisor, and I still help out a lot.
So the team is still active?
No, the teams are still active, but here again, when you only have a fatality once every 18 months, not a whole lot for them to do, kind of hard to stay organized.
Yeah, that's true. But the good thing is we don't have the fatalities as often as they used to.
Exactly. That is the good thing about it. That the need for them is not what it used to be. And now when something does happen, we're all more concerned about the whys and of how it happened. We've had some here in the past couple of years that have just been everything you read about it or look at it is just, why did this happen? Why was somebody acting this way? Why are they just not taking care of themselves or their equipment like they should be? And they think it's okay to do something like this. I mean, cave diving is a dangerous sport. We've advanced so much in it that we take a lot of aspects of it for granted because we've made it so safe with advances in equipment, caves with permanent lines in them that are marked, and local cave divers keep them maintained for the visitors and everything. that we've, you know, it's too easy to do everything right to do something stupid.
My opinion. Okay. Yeah. Do you think that the accident reports should be published on the social media or some other type of media? I'm not necessarily meaning internet. You know, for the educators and other professionals to learn from the mistakes, or is that something that should not be publicized or should be, you know, released to the public?
No, they should be made available. Okay, they should be made available, but we get into a gray area there, which is a problem. One, you know, the recovery teams work, you know, for maybe a day or 2 days, maybe longer, to take care of a recovery, and then everybody's expecting instant information about what went on, and then we get all the Monday morning quarterbacks with their opinions, not based on any fact. So the reports themselves should be released, but give us a little bit of time to make sure we're accurate. And those reports should be the facts only. The problem we run into is that too many people like to put their opinions with it. And now we get into this area of, is it opinion or is it accident analysis? Okay, what is your expertise to voice your opinion in a realm of accident analysis? And what kind of insight do you have on the diver himself to know whether or not it was, you know, the cause and effect is what you think it is? And some of it is an area of, we can't release anything until law enforcement will let us do it. Okay, because when we do a body recovery, you are there at their request. They're calling the shots. And then it's up to them how much they will let us release. Now, with good PR and everything, they'll let us release a lot of it. The manatee incident was a good one there, where they wanted everybody to know what happened because it could be prevented if people knew. So we were free to do what we wanted to do with releasing information. But then sometimes they'll say no, because there might be some medical issues or something associated with an active case that they don't want it released until all that's done. And the bad part about that is the fact that depending on the county and such, because it's a fatality that there was no foul play involved, no one's going to court, that gets put on the bottom of the pile when it comes to getting everything done with the coroner, the medical examiner, the medical examiner and all. So we get these delays in information. And then that just fuels the fire on social media. Everybody wanting to hear something when we don't have all the facts yet. Now, you want to say he made a mistake, where what really happened was he had a stroke. You know, so, but I do feel they should be published. We used to do that quite regularly. And then we got to a state where there were too many lawsuits being filed that we started backing off on what we released because of lawsuits. There was a double, and actually I was reading in there, it was a double fatality that I worked in Madison Blue years ago. I think it was 2001, where the wife sued Madison, the owners of Madison Blue, it wasn't a park yet, and the CDS, the national, well, the NSS CDS, because the line broke. They said it was our responsibility to maintain the line, and her husband wouldn't have died. So, active lawsuit went on for 18 months until she finally dropped the suit. Then after 18 months is when I had a 45-minute phone call with her to tell her what happened from the scene, from the recovery, because I worked the recovery. But I got numerous calls from her until I can't talk to you because you filed a lawsuit. So if we could take that out of the equation, it would be so much easier to do accident analysis and report on these things. So even though we just have to be careful about the release of information that could be premature. You know, we had an incident at Silver Glen Springs a few years back where a free diver drowned over there at Silver Glen, and it was right around Christmas. I got the call, but Bill Foote and Dan Lenz and a couple of others were already down there. Very good cave divers and worked recoveries before. They should have no problem, finding the guy. And but they couldn't find him. It was a month before we actually found the body. Because, it was a month. It wasn't pretty. But the point is that the first headlines came out. Cave diver drowns at Silver Glen. He was a basic cave diver, but he was just free diving. But the better headline was cave diver drowns at Silver Glen. Okay, and on top of that, then we had all of the speculation as into he was taken by his drug dealer and all this kind of stuff. I mean, all kind of rumors going on and speculation as to what can happen, just like with the one over at Vortex. But it was 30 days before we actually found the body. When the sheriff was going to get ready to, he wanted one more reconnaissance done to check out everything before they closed the case. So I hadn't been over there at all during that 30 days. Other teams were working it. So I told Bill, it's like, okay, before they close it, let me come over there with a set of fresh eyes and eyes from a fresh team. Now that's the only way to do it and be sure, because you're going to look at the same places and glance over it if you've already looked there before. So with new team members, we found the body in a place that I can understand totally why people wouldn't have found him, because it was a little cubby that you can see down both tunnels and not know it's there unless you swam right up on it. So we were able to do the recovery and get the body out. But here again, all the rumors started flying about what happened. But I haven't seen the footage or anything, but he had a GoPro with him because this was one of those adventure free diving snorkelers, cave diving snorkelers. Apparently there's a YouTube channel for that stuff. And that's what he was doing. And he had a GoPro. So we turned it over to the sheriff's department when it was all said and done.
What do you think is the future of cave diving?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I mean, right now, the fact that we've introduced rebreathers to cave diving, I'm trying to think, well, what is next? You start talking the future of cave diving. It would be nice if we could find more sites to have more cave diving sites for people to go to and visit, because after 40 years, I still enjoy diving Peacock, but I would like something new around here. But, more sites would be one thing. But as far as cave diving itself, with more electronics and more things like that going on, 3D mapping of caves while you're swimming, oh my God, you come out and be able to play it immediately without having to run it through all type of computers to generate the map. Things like that could actually help make cave diving more acceptable to the public by actually being able to really see what's down there, rather than thinking they're nothing but these very small, dark little places. You're always going to have that out there for the adventure seekers, but to make it to where it's more acceptable because people have a better look at what's going on there. So if technology can proceed where you just mount the little camera and come out and you've got this total playback of the entire dive, it could be very awesome for helping cave diving move forward. Equipment, rebreathers, I want to see us come out with a scrubber that can more than double, triple the duration and a quarter the size. Get away from the standard scrubbing material to something new and innovative that can help us reduce all this and make them even safer. Those are the kind of things I would like to see move forward.
Yes. What would you like to pass or share for the future generation or current generation of cave divers? To share?
Well, I've loved cave diving for these 40 years. I've never gotten to a point where I didn't enjoy it or didn't like it. But everybody approaches this at a different speed and a different level. So be respectful of those who are not at the same level or pace you are. And instead of trying to bring people to your level, dive at their level, see what they're thinking about, and then let them progress at their own pace. To me, that's some of the stuff that can help with some of the issues I've seen is people trying to go too fast, too soon, because they want to catch up with their buddy. You know, oh, I want to go to the Hinkle. Wow, okay, well, let me buy a scooter and take a course. But dude, there's all this cave within 2,000 feet of the entrance. Slow down. You know, smell the roses, so to speak. Get a good feel for it rather than trying to go back to the back of the cave. Okay? Take your time, there's lots to see. And if you think you've seen it all, there's a number of people you can call that will show you something new back there. Take your time and, you know, follow the rules. The rules are there because of accident analysis. When you start breaking them, you're taking risks, you're taking chances, and, you know, be careful about stepping across that line. The evolution of the training standards has been the fit the need of the new cave diver and what's going on with just training and just approach and attitude toward things. It was easy to do a mentoring process back in the 80s when there was no Mexico. Like I said, Mexico didn't become popular until the 90s. Like I said, my first trips there were in 87. I was exploring and laying line all the way through 92, 93, because it was still not much going on there. So it was easy to have that mentoring process. It's easier to keep instructors in line in terms of following standards and teaching a good course when there's only one agency. Okay? When I was training chairman of the CDS, it was only us and NACD, and we had the lion's share, which meant if there was a questionable actions going on by an instructor, I could put them on probation, I could do whatever, and it wasn't, oh, I'll just teach for the other agency. Today, instructors have too many choices of which agency they want to teach for or which certification they want to issue, which in some ways can make the training not as good as what it can be because they have too many options to do things a different way. But overall, training standards have gotten better because we have increased time. We've tried to increase accountability for what goes on with QAs going out to students after the classes and such. So we try to do a lot more in terms of managing all these instructors we have now. But at the end of the day, it's really not about the agencies as much as it is about the instructors. And there are some of them out there that, you know, they teach in a way that they're trying to do as much as they can in as little time as possible. And then you have the others that really care and want to make it happen. And then you have the student who wants to go zero to hero. And the whole time during course, they're asking, what's next? What's next? When am I done? When am I done? When what you really want to tell them is, you aren't there yet. You need more time. You need more dives. You know, and that's the fine line now with, you know, people are allowed too many options. Well, I didn't like the way this instructor handled things, so I'm gonna go somewhere else. So it's kind of a mess out there when you look at how many things that can be done and such. It was easier in the days of the mentorship because instructors, it was a smaller group and easier to talk to. Now, we have so many agencies and so many different certifications. I get calls about, Lamar, is this an agency we should recognize? At dive shops, because there are more agencies than you can believe with cave certifications. You know, so that to me is the big problem, is that, you know, where they want to have there needs to be a common denominator for all of it, but the instructors themselves need to have, they need to be held to a higher standard than what they are, for the most part. There are a lot of good instructors, but there are a few that need to be held to a higher standard.